Hello, everyone, and welcome to President Andy Hamilton's Alumni and Parents Weekend State of the University Address. I'm Dasha Ratu, President of the NYU Alumni Association and NYU Alumni Trustee, and a proud graduate of the Gallatin School of Individualized Study, class of 2014. It's my great pleasure to introduce NYU's 16th President, Andrew Hamilton, who will share the latest updates on his priorities and university initiatives and his vision for our amazing university. Since President Hamilton joined our NYU family in 2016, he's continued our academic momentum and trajectory as a prominent research university with an unrivaled network that stretches across the globe. During an academic year that's brought unprecedented change to our global community, NYU has continued its steady progress with resiliency and creativity under President Hamilton's steady leadership. I'd now like to turn it over to the person who's been pivotal in these efforts and NYU's ongoing evolution as one of the world's foremost universities. Fellow members of the NYU community, it gives me great pleasure to introduce Andy Hamilton, President of New York University.
Dasha, thank you for that introduction and for your leadership of the NYU Alumni Association, and a warm welcome to all of the alumni, parents, and family members joining us today. Now, Alumni and Parents Weekend is one of my favorite weekends of the year, and I wish, as we all do, that we could meet and celebrate together in person. But I love the fact that when NYU does a virtual Alumni and Parents Weekend, we go big with more than 10,000 attendees zooming in from 61 countries. Now, in my 40 years in higher education, I can truly say that this has been a year like no other. Beginning in January, when we moved NYU Shanghai's courses online, through the rapidly changing events of the spring, through the reopening of our New York campus and many of our global sites this fall, NYU has faced a set of challenges unprecedented in its history. And so it fills me with great pride to report that the NYU community has risen to those challenges with creativity, determination, ingenuity, and boldness that define this remarkable university. Since the beginning of the pandemic, two responsibilities have motivated every decision that we have taken. The first is our responsibility to keep the NYU community safe. And parents, I'll speak especially to you for a moment. My wife Jenny and I raised 3 children, and we still remember that curious mix of pride and panic that we felt sending each one off to college. So I can well imagine how it must feel to have your children in college in the midst of a global pandemic. And I want to assure you that we take the responsibility of their care and safety very, very seriously indeed. Our second responsibility is to this university. How can we ensure that it continues to fulfill its mission of world-class teaching, learning, and research? That it continues to make a positive, lasting impact on society, and that it continues the remarkable upward trajectory that it's traveled over these past 5 decades, even while facing unimagined obstacles. With those two responsibilities in mind, we worked throughout the summer to form a comprehensive health and safety plan that has allowed over 22,000 students to return to the New York campus and to nearly all of NYU's global campuses and sites, allowing them to reopen. Now, in a few moments, Dr. Ciotoli will speak in more detail about the safety measures in the conversation to follow. But I want to just note a few highlights of our approach. A core part of our plan is our extensive university-wide testing system, through which we have conducted nearly 100,000 tests on NYU's New York campus since August the 1st. We continue to test students living in NYU residence halls weekly, and we test bi-weekly any faculty member and staff and university presidents, indeed, who are using campus buildings. Also essential to our approach has been cultivating a sense of community. Our slogan for all COVID-related communications, from our website to the signage around campus, our slogan is "Keep each other safe." The sense that we are all in this together and that we have an obligation to look out for one another. We've also employed over 300 students as public health ambassadors who serve as role models of safe behavior and help inform the community about the new safety and health routines on campus. For a university the size and complexity of NYU, returning to campus has been a massive undertaking. It's required the diligence and good faith of every member of the NYU community. Faculty have stepped up to continue outstanding education, both in person and online. IT teams have made sure our new technology needs are met. From our residence life staff to our cleaning staff to our wonderful students, all have risen to the occasion. For all of us, these past 10 months have been marked by uncertainty. But there is one thing I am certain of, which is I have seen demonstrated again and again the unwavering resilience and dedication of the NYU community. And I am delighted to report that thanks to that community, of which our more than 600,000 alumni are a crucial part, thanks to that community, NYU is thriving. We have achieved this year our highest ever ranking in the Times Higher Education World University Rankings and in the QS World University Rankings, coming in at number 26 and number 35 worldwide, respectively. And we remain in the top 30 in the US News and World Report rankings, now for the 4th year in a row. Our incoming freshman class, the class of 2024, this fall, was the most diverse in NYU's history, and it boasted the highest median SAT score in NYU history. And NYU's community members continue to earn recognition for their enormous talent. In just the past year, NYU faculty have won MacArthur Genius Grants, have been elected to the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, and also elected to the National Academy of Sciences. NYU alumni have won 16 Emmy Awards, 8 Grammy Awards, and 2 Pulitzer Prizes. 2 NYU students from NYU Abu Dhabi were named Rhodes Scholars this year. And just recently, Emmanuelle Charpentier, who previously worked as a research scientist at NYU Langone, spending a critical part of her career here. She also holds an honorary doctorate from NYU. Just last week, she won the Nobel Prize in Chemistry. The NYU community has joined together in many other ways as well. In the wake of continued grievous examples of racial aggression and discrimination in the United States and throughout the world, NYU has redoubled our commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion, including expanding funding for key scholarship programs and increasing support of faculty members working in the areas of social justice, inequality, criminal justice reform, and related topics. Throughout this tumultuous year, I've often thought of NYU's history. The university has endured a cholera epidemic that struck just after the university opened. It endured the Civil War. It endured a grave financial crisis. Of course, it endured 9/11 and Hurricane Sandy. After each challenge, we, NYU, have come out stronger, more innovative, more resilient, more united. And I know that the same will hold true when the pandemic has passed and long after that time. This is NYU, a university like no other, and I am so proud to be part of it. And I thank you, all of you, for your involvement, your support, and your immense violet pride. And now it's my pleasure to welcome 3 colleagues whose leadership has been crucial to the successes that I've just detailed. That's the beauty of being a university president. I get to take credit for the result of the hard work, the immense dedication of colleagues like these. So would you please join me in welcoming Catherine Fleming, Provost of NYU and the Alexander S. Onassis Professor of Hellenic Culture and Civilization in the Faculty of Arts and Science, Lisa Coleman, who is Senior Vice President for Global Inclusion and Strategic Innovation and the university's Chief Diversity Officer, and Carlo Ciatoli, Head of NYU's COVID-19 Prevention and Response Team. He's also Associate Vice President for Student Health and a Clinical Assistant Professor at NYU's Grossman School of Medicine. And let me add, Lisa and Carlo are both NYU alumni. Now, would you please join me on camera, Katie, Carlo, and Lisa. And to begin with, I'd like to talk about the factors, the different issues that we have been dealing with on campus these past 6-8 months. And particularly to begin with students. And Carlo, let me begin with you. In this most unusual academic year, could you give us all a sense of how are our students doing? They're now exposed to frequent testing. Some of them have had to quarantine. Physical distancing, new procedures are part of all of our lives. It is a great deal to take in. How are our students adapting to these new protocols, this new life at NYU? Carlo.
Sure, certainly. And first, thank you, President Hamilton, for the opportunity, and good morning to all the parents, my fellow alums, and everyone on the webinar. Overwhelmingly, students are doing exceptionally well in embracing, as you noted, all of the new protocols, policies, and requirements that we've asked of them. Knowing that some of them are difficult, knowing that some of them require personal sacrifice, from mask wearing to distancing to the limits on social gatherings, the testing requirements that you had talked about, and especially I think for some students, the challenging need to isolate and quarantine. Students have done everything that we have asked of them, and that has allowed us, NYU, to have an in-person, on-campus presence without restricting who we invited back. Unlike many of our peer institutions who were restrictive in who they invited back, some of whom had no one come back to campus. We felt strongly we could invite everyone back, do it safely, and as the largest private university in the country, I think we should take great pride in the fact that we were able to do that, and we really have our students to thank for that, because of their adherence to all of the things that we've asked for. I would also like to say I've had multiple conversations and email exchanges with both students and parents, and almost always they start with a note of appreciation, regardless of the issue that we're talking about. They are so appreciative that the students are here in person, able to have at least some degree of in-person teaching, which I know is so important for them. So there is that appreciation, and I do want to thank both the students and parents for their understanding of the flexibility that we've had to have. We built flexibility into our approach, knowing that public health conditions change, guidelines change, situations change, and there has been tremendous understanding on the part of the students for the need for that flexibility. So all in all, I think our students have done exceptionally well so far this semester.
Great, thank you, Carlo. Now, Katie, this is a very different kind of semester for our students academically. NYU is open, and as I said earlier, a significant number of students have come to campus, but of course some have chosen not to come to campus and are studying remotely. Others, international students in particular, have not been able to make it to the US, even if they had wished to. How are they navigating this new world of remote learning, teaching online, of social distancing within the classroom?
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. So we are trying to find out the answer to precisely that question. And to that end, we're doing a tremendous amount of reach out to all of the different student constituencies. As you point out, just as we have a number who are here in New York City on campus with us, we also have thousands of students who are fully remote this semester, and they are just as much a part of the student body as anyone else. I was very gratified just 2 days ago to receive an email from one of our professors, Judith Graves Miller in the Department of French, who described our students, and I think quite aptly, as extraordinarily brave and connected. And when I followed up with her to ask whether she was referring to students of a particular modality, by which I mean students who were in person as opposed to students studying remotely, she said, no, all of them. And her experience seems to be that of many of our other faculty as well in speaking about our students. Everybody, of course, is having to adapt on the run to new modes of being, whether you're here in person and discovering that actually you can't gather around a dining table with 15 other people, or if you're remote sitting in a living room somewhere on a computer screen. It is a very, very big change. But really the consistent thing that we're showing is this kind of braveness, a willingness to take on the challenge of the new situation, and a search for connection. I think many of our students are very, very connected, as Professor Miller said, but we're also acutely aware that it is a big challenge under these circumstances to be connected and stay connected.
Lisa, this has been a tough year for America on so many levels, but it's also been a year where we've witnessed acts of police brutality. We've seen acts of racism and anti-Blackness in cities around the country. How are the students responding to these pressures on American society, this recognition of historical racism throughout America?
Thank you, Andy. And thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, and welcome to all the parents and alums. And as a proud alum, I have to say, I'm so proud of our community. We've done a lot of work, and I want to also say, I just hope everyone is out there taking good care. As Andy has mentioned, these are difficult and challenging times. Our students have rallied and come together. We're seeing record numbers, and this sort of echoes some of what Provost Fleming was saying, record numbers of participation in many of our programs. We have new courses, our Big Ideas courses. We have our MLK Scholars Program, which we have enhanced, and we're working with our Office of Student Enrollment, and we're seeing those students re-engaged in ways to re-engage the work of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. We have partners with our Student Government Association, and they have expanded their mentorship programs across and working with all of our students. We are also seeing through our Center for Multicultural Education and Programs, and thank you to people like Leah Lattimore, and of course our partners in student global programs and student activities, whether those are zones focused on racial equity and justice, our immigration zones, our solidarity and ally weeks. And of course, we've increased our work in our areas also of disability inclusive culture, because we know about the intersections of this kind of work. So people of color who also have disabilities or a member of our LGBTQ plus populations. It's our 25th anniversary of our LGBTQ plus center, so we're seeing our students very involved in these activities, in these intersectional spaces there as well. And thank you to all the students who have enhanced our mentorship programs. And thank you to the alums out there who are helping with those programs, particularly those directed toward our most vulnerable students who've been impacted. And also we've increased, just in case you think it's only focused on our undergraduate students, we've also refocused our graduate students of color networking programs and our outreach and programs there as well, including leadership initiatives and work with our postdoc communities. So thank you also to Charlton McElvey. I just want to say again, thank you to our students. I can't say enough about how much they are working so hard to ensure that as a community, and as Carlos said, one of the largest communities through all of our volunteer organizations, whether that, and obviously a lot of that is online and through the remote spaces right now, but our students have been extremely engaged in opportunities to make our NYU better, but also our entire world better.
Thank you. Let's shift focus and talk a little bit about the impact of these last months on NYU faculty and staff and our wider community. And of course, everyone listening this morning will remember those incredible days in early March, mid-March this year, when very suddenly NYU shifted. I think it was something like 16,000 courses that in the spring of 2020 were being taught in person, and they were transitioned literally over a period of 2, 3, 4 days to being taught fully remotely. And of course, that was the incredible hard work and dedication of our faculty that allowed that transition to occur so effectively. Let me start with you, Katie, in particular. These new ways of teaching, yes, in person, but also with students studying remotely, and of course, blended forms of teaching with both remote and in-person students. How have faculty been adjusting to this new world? And are there silver linings? Are we seeing an impact in a positive way on pedagogy, on the way in which teaching at NYU takes place?
Absolutely, there are some silver linings. The faculty who seem to be coping the best, and they all just by dint of the fact that they managed to carry on, as you say, during a very abrupt transition, is a form of success. But beyond that, we're seeing that a lot of the faculty are using this as an opportunity to do things that they'd been thinking about doing for a long time. For instance, figuring out ways to make in-class sessions, which now, of course, in the case of remote classes, bear a resemblance to this format that we're in right now, consist of more discussion and less lecturing. As we planned this event to have sort of more discussion and less just kind of talking, because that doesn't work well for an audience. People are figuring out how to connect with their students, even in circumstances that don't allow for physical connection. People have been doing really innovative things with office hours. In the case of classes that are being held in person, I know of faculty who are holding what they call park hours and suggesting that students take a walk with them or sit socially distanced on a bench. And that creates a kind of peculiar intimacy and closeness and ability to really talk with a student about their interests and their work that the kind of run-of-the-mill sitting behind your desk in the office might not allow for. And I do have the sense that a number of the innovations that faculty have put in place are going to remain. I know the question that we all tirelessly ask one another is, when are things going to, quote, go back to normal? And much as that's something for which we all long, I think in the case of our faculty, a lot of the things that they have ended up changing, they're going to want to keep in place. Now, that's not to say it's all fun and games. It's a very, very challenging thing to sustain learning via a remote format over an entire semester. But as I say, the faculty who are being really innovative, and that is a good deal of our faculty who are doing that, I think are seeing some successes that they're going to keep in place after this.
Yeah, as someone who's taught organic chemistry for many years, one of the things I think I do love about Zoom is that there is no back row that students can slouch on and fall asleep on. Everyone is upfront and very much engaged in the activities of the classroom. Lisa, the issues of diversity, inclusion, and equity have been a major priority for NYU over many years. But of course, this past summer, these past months, we've seen many issues rising to the fore in America. How have this past summer, how have the events of the last months affected NYU's approach to diversity, inclusion, and equity, and indeed acted as a catalyst for our goals and ambitions?
Yes, thank you again. Again, I have to thank our entire community because our faculty, students, staff, and administrators have really, and our alums have really bonded together during this time. And it's also allowed us an opportunity to think about things like intergenerational work, right? How we work across generations in new and interesting ways. And so to think about skill building and cohort-based sessions. And as Provost Fleming was saying, whether it's in the park or or walking around the piers, wherever it is, right? And so really thinking about those spaces and those new places where people can build new opportunities to have different kinds of conversations in these spaces. So we've created a new Global Scholars and Innovators series over the summer to complement our NYU Reads with our Aronson professor, Brian Stevenson out of our NYU Law School, who, of course, many of you have had the opportunity, I think, to see his film now, even Just Mercy, including the book. And so we were able to bring in three scholars over the summer, one from Princeton, one from Yale, and one from NYU, to really accelerate this work and bring our students into the conversation. And as I mentioned, we've been seeing record numbers, 1,700 people signing up online for these kinds of programs. And we've also done work with our own public safety to gain a greater recognition of what's happening here inside of NYU. We've seen our website. We've created a website for toolkits and resources. And in 3 days, we saw 18,000 people come with unique hits onto that website. We've developed micro grants for our faculty for them to engage in these initiatives. And thank you to Provost Fleming for her partnership in these areas. The programs like contextualizing anti-racism and anti-Asian racism at the beginning of the pandemic, and then looking at Blackness and racism and protest in the past and present and future, and then looking at work with our Indigenous communities. And lastly, what I'll say, of course, is our work with our NYU Women group. Thank you to everyone as we think about the ratification this year. So no matter what area it's been, Andy, we've really seen our community come together to leverage, as Provost Fleming was saying, this opportunity to uplift our scholars, our students, our alumni, and our faculty and staff.
Thank you, Lisa. Carlo, again, talking about the community, I mentioned in my words earlier that we at NYU have focused on this phrase, keep each other safe, as our strapline, as the way in which we focus everyone's attention on the community response to COVID. Could you expand a little on how keeping each other safe has worked in practice, what behaviors we have emphasized, and I think particularly from the perspective of perhaps the fundamental issue that a pandemic does bring to each community, the recognition that it is through collective action as well as individual responsibility that we will chart our way through these difficult times. But I'd love to hear you talk a little about how the community has responded to keep each other safe.
Sure. And let me start, as you alluded to some of the specific behaviors that are necessary and that allow us to keep each other safe. The things that allow us to have an in-person presence for our research to continue, to have a residential population here on campus, and all having really limited transmission. So I think we have been keeping each other safe. When we wear a mask, as everyone knows, that's less about protecting ourselves and more about protecting everyone else. We know that people who don't have any symptoms can actually transmit COVID. So that is why wearing a mask is so important. The data is now clear. Wearing a mask limits your ability to transmit. And people have been exceptionally good about wearing their masks. I think you alluded to our public health ambassadors. So in addition to handing out masks, encouraging mask wearing, they also provide us with a little bit of a snapshot of how people are doing each day. And again, they report back incredibly high levels of adherence to the mask wearing. So certainly that's one behavior. The distancing, same thing. It's as much about keeping the other person safe as it is about keeping you safe, by being, maintaining that 6-foot separation, by minimizing the number of people who are at a gathering, which I know at times can be exceptionally challenging for all of us, including students. But again, that limits the number of people that we can potentially transmit to. The testing requirements, again, as much about you knowing your status, but also if you find out you're positive, isolating, staying home, again, protecting everyone else. So again, collectively, if everyone does that, which thankfully so far this semester, we've had wonderful compliance and we've had exceptionally limited transmission, almost none on campus, which has been incredibly reassuring as we move forward. Second, and I think others have alluded to this, we keep each other safe by being flexible in how we operate, whether that means how we operate in the classroom, how we operate in our service delivery. And I know for us, even at the Student Health Center, we have continued to provide many services remotely. We've actually gotten quite positive feedback from students on that. How we deliver programs, much like this one, remotely, and allowing that flexibility in how we move forward with all of our various activities. And then finally, I think keeping each other safe relies on us both listening to each other and learning from each other. Thinking back just about our broad global community of NYU, we learned quite a bit from our Shanghai colleagues who went through this before everyone else and came back before everyone else. And we were able to see that coming back to campus could be done safely. And I think it paved the way and gave us some initial confidence that we could do it. Again, I've had many conversations with students, with parents who have provided suggestions, and the openness to listen and learn, I think, is another critical way that we keep each other safe, knowing that we're all going through this for the first time, knowing that we have that flexibility, and knowing there are things that we can do better.
Yeah, you're quite right. And the community has been wonderful. Our students in particular have engaged with Keep Each Other Safe really with gusto. And I mentioned 300 of our students are acting as public health ambassadors. They've been very enthusiastically encouraging everyone to follow the rules, to keep each other safe, even not just NYU, but in the community as well. And our public health ambassadors have been in Washington Square handing out masks to those who might not have one. And so it certainly for us has been a community effort. I'd like to spend a little bit of time just talking about the future, the way in which this experience, difficult, challenging experience, but one, as we are hearing, we are learning from in significant ways. Lisa, let's begin. Diversity, inclusion, and equity. You, Lisa, are our first Chief Diversity Officer. What do you see in both the immediate and the long-term future for NYU's goals in diversity, inclusion, and equity?
Thank you so much, Andy. We, of course, as many know, completed a very large assessment across all of NYU called Being at NYU, and we collected an enormous amount of data and information. So we've also developed from that, also as a result of me coming into the institution, a new structure called our Global Inclusion Officers structure. And these are people across all of our schools and units. There are about 50 of them who work across all of our schools and areas to help us do this important work. And as a result, what they're also doing is using the data that we've collected both at the school level and then through the Being at NYU assessment to actually then plan for new initiatives and look at some of the areas where we can do better. Certainly, as all institutions have areas where we can do better. And so thinking about faculty diversification, thinking about, as you said, we brought in the most diverse classes for our students, but how can we build better programs to support those students, whether those are in areas of disability or students, programs for our women students, our LGBTQ plus students. I already mentioned that this is our 25th anniversary of the LGBTQ plus Center. So using those kinds of opportunities to build structures. Additionally, we're working with career services to think about programs and opportunities. We know that many of our students during 2020 and unfortunately, perhaps even in 2021, have to think about employment opportunities. So partnering with our internal career services, but then partnering with large organizations like Walt Disney Imagineering. We have a program coming up with them to think about opportunities there. And then lastly, what I'll say, of course, is then really thinking about this future of higher education. We have a new partnership with the University of Pretoria. We have a new panel coming up and really engaging our global partners. We'll be working with people from New Zealand and out of India. And through this NYU Be Together initiative, we've transitioned to something called NYU Be Together. And we now have 15 committees working on this, including a committee directed just toward our alumni constituents. So if you're interested in joining, please reach out through the OGI website, and we will be sure to include you on one of those committees. But this is a way, right, for our community to really come together, to be engaged, to develop new initiatives. One of the new initiatives I'll just share, at least two of them I'll share with you, is Tisch School of the Arts has created a new Broadway engagement opportunity. Anytime the Tisch School does anything, as you just mentioned, we win Tony Awards, etc. So I assume the awards will be coming later. But this is a way to engage our community in important diversity and equity inclusion principles. And they'll be role playing and acting things out. And thank you to Allison Green. Thank you to our School of Engineering. We're going to have hackathons and solve-a-thons. And as a former computer science person, I'm really excited about those kinds of things as well. No matter what discipline, our School of Global Public Health. Let me not start naming all the schools because there are just too many and there are too many things happening. But I just want to say everybody is engaged in the cross-partnership levels. Again, in this intergenerational space is really, truly just inspiring, but also will allow us to greet these next disruptions. Because as Provost Fleming said, we know this isn't a new normal, but what may be normal is disruption. And so how do we leverage and think about how we're gearing up for whatever is next? And I'm proud of what our community has done so far, and I'm ready for what's next. Thank you, Andy.
Lisa, that's great. Now, Carlo, I don't think there's a person on NYU's campus who's been asked this question more often than you. What does the future hold for the pandemic? In particular, what does it hold for NYU? And of course, most immediately, what does it hold for the spring semester, spring 2021, of course, at NYU?
Sure. And I will say, I think broadly, next semester will look largely like this semester. I think if we believe what we're seeing and the reports about if and when a vaccine will be available, I certainly think we'll start the spring semester much the way we started the fall semester. And unless guidance changes from the state, that will mean people coming back from restricted states will continue to have to quarantine. We will more than likely do another round of what we call gateway testing, which is people testing upon their return back to the university. We will continue with our ongoing testing program, obviously isolating, quarantining, thinking about how we can potentially change and expand perhaps some of the way that students in particular can gather, obviously taking into account the public health environment. I think the big wild card, as we noted for the spring, may be the availability of a vaccine and how that might change things if and when it becomes available. Obviously, a vaccine needs to be widely distributed, have a fairly large percent of the population vaccinated before you can feel good that you've really protected the community in a way that would allow you to perhaps roll back some of the restrictions. So all in all, I think we're looking at a spring semester that in many ways will look like the fall, obviously having learned lessons, gained experience in executing some of the things that we needed to do, but again, largely looking like, I think, the fall semester. I think we've also learned, and others alluded to, some of the remote teaching, remote service delivery, and I think much of that will continue into the spring semester as well. I will say more long-term, just to build on what Lisa said, through all of the planning that I've had to do, thinking about the university through the lens of transmission and, who's connected to who and worrying about disease transmission, all of the academic departments, the schools, the operational units, did actually give me the opportunity to think through, just as Lisa did, where are the opportunities actually to leverage some of that interconnectedness? Where are the networks that we can develop within NYU to not only address COVID, but all the other challenging issues that we have both at NYU and frankly, external to NYU. And with so much expertise, so much lived experience within the university, I think there's even more opportunity to tap into some of that interconnectedness that we have and hopefully really solve some vexing problems that we've had broadly.
Katie, there we hear the impact of the interconnectedness and this new world that we're living through. How do you see the pandemic, our response to the pandemic, affecting teaching, learning, research in the future? Will we see more online teaching as part of the NYU offering? How do you see it changing?
We certainly shall. As my colleagues from NYU know, we have an individual in my office whose entire remit as vice provost is to work on online education and to encourage more of it. He was joking with me the other day that COVID had rendered his job absolutely meaningless because we were able, as a result of COVID, to sort of bring about change of a sort that otherwise wouldn't have been possible. I think it's very likely that after this, we are going to look not simply at having more remote options, but much greater flexibility. Dr. Chittoli has spoken at length about all of the different types of flexibility that we tried to offer to people. That's a really good thing for our students, and it's a really good thing for our faculty to be able to choose their courses in very different ways is something that we want to keep in place. Certainly, any of you out there who may have experienced during your time at NYU something called a snow day, it is likely that that will be one for the history books now that we've realized that one doesn't actually always have to be physically present in a classroom for that class to take place. But I want to close with the same topic on which I started, namely the theme of connectedness. Because connecting has been so difficult during this moment, people have made efforts of a sort in the direction of connection that they don't normally make under non-pandemic circumstances. And it has been a really, really moving and remarkable thing to see the new ways in which people are really, really trying to connect with one another. Increasingly, we know that human connection is a vitally important part of overall well-being. And increasingly as an institution, we're thinking about the lessons of COVID around connecting to others and really carrying them forward so that we can be concerned about people's ability to connect with one another, not just during a pandemic, but under, quote, normal circumstances as well.
So you heard it here first, folks. No more lions on snow days at NYU. Katie, we have a couple of minutes left, and just to follow up on that theme of connectedness, obviously a distinctive character of NYU these past 3-4 decades has been our global network and the very large number of students and faculty who, under normal circumstances, would travel the world, going to Abu Dhabi, Shanghai, or one of our 12 other sites around the world to study, to learn. Of course, that's not been possible. The airline industry, even visas, the ability to cross borders has been so restricted these past months. NYU, as is so often the case, has come forward with a very innovative program called Go Local, a program that offers the opportunity for NYU's international students who would have been in New York City but were unable to be here to nonetheless connect with one of our global sites and to carry on their studies and to have the support that the global site, whether it's in Shanghai, whether it's in Abu Dhabi or London or Berlin or Buenos Aires. Katie, just touch upon for a few moments the way in which Go Local has also helped the university in a very interesting and an innovative way to respond to COVID.
Right. So on just a purely numerical level, it's made it possible for us to give an in-person experience to thousands of international students who otherwise would have been coming to New York, but were unable to have that in-person experience via a local NYU site. But this in turn, paradoxically, has forced us to really rethink what it is that we're doing when we do global education. Because of course, normally what you're trying to do if you have a student traveling, say, from the United States to China, is to give them in some meaningful way a Chinese experience. But with Go Local, now if we have a Chinese national attending NYU in China, when normally they would have been attending NYU in New York, what we're trying to do is figure out how to give them a sort of NYU New Yorkie experience, despite the fact that they haven't been able to travel to New York themselves. So it is a wonderful resource, and it's also one that's really making us think in different ways about the relationship of our global sites to the local communities in which they are based, and figuring out how we can be relevant both to local populations, to people who live in France at our French site, as well as to students traveling from New York to those sites. And that will create a greater diversity of activities at the sites, and is certainly one of the things, to go back to what we were speaking about earlier, one of the things that we will want to hang on to in the blissful post-COVID era that we all so eagerly await.
Indeed, and certainly the Go Local program, as you heard from Katie, is offering opportunities for our international students to stay connected, to continue their studies, but also to remain as NYU students. And I will say, my fellow university presidents of universities around the country are very envious of NYU. The Global Network University was set up for one particular purpose: to allow our students and staff to travel and to learn other cultures, other languages. That's not been possible these past months, and we have been able to convert it to something that is equally important and useful during this difficult time. Of course, we will return. Of course, travel will come back, but it is likely it'll be a few months to come. But the NYU Go Local program has been an important part of our response to the pandemic. Time is up, and let me thank very much indeed Katie Fleming, Lisa Coleman, and Carlo Ciotoli for being our panelists this morning, telling us about NYU and its response to the pandemic. And also let me thank all of you for participating this morning at this event and for being part of the Alumni and Parents Weekend activities. I hope you have lots of fun and enjoyable activities for the rest of the day and tomorrow. And I can't wait to welcome you all back to campus in person when it is safe to do so. We hope that will be very soon, but obviously, as Katie said, we await that day with alacrity. So thank you all for participating, and enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you.